A really warm welcome to everyone joining us today for the session on creating work environments for open and honest conversations. This is the first event to kick off UNIfy, an annual festival which runs and starts today up to the 30th of April. If you haven't had a chance to have a look at the exciting lineup of events, workshops and performances, then head over to bradford.ac.uk/events/UNIfy. There's lots of time to still get involved. The theme this year is What a Difference. We're celebrating all things that make us different, recognising people, projects and organisations that are making a huge difference to people across Bradford District. I am Zara Niazi, Strategic Lead for Equality, Diversity Inclusion for the Wellbeing Board and Healthcare Partnership, and most importantly, your host for today. Before I introduce you to our fantastic lineup of speakers, let's make sure everything is working for you online. We can't hear or see you, but we will pick up any comments or questions you have for us, so please do make use of the Q&A section and I will do my best to get answers for you during the session. So over the next hour and a half, we're going to talk to 4 panel members to share examples of how psychological safe spaces have been delivered for a wide range of topics and audiences, and to share the difference and impact that has made. The term psychological safety in workplaces was coined by Harvard Business School Professor Amy Edmondson. She describes it that it takes candour, ability to manage conflict, seeking to understand, finding better solutions together, and going beyond our comfort zone. Interestingly, Amy says psychological safe spaces is a means to the goal, it's not the goal itself, but our commitment to excellence. Although there's no one way of delivering psychological safe spaces, as you hear from all of our speakers, there are some general principles, good practices, as well as notable impact this has had on culture, trust, cohesion, belonging, as well as productivity and innovation. We hope you'll be able to take away some nuggets of information that will enable you to create your own psychological safe spaces to help unlock the full potential of your organisation and make a difference to the happiness and well-being of the people you work with and obviously serve. A well-designed and well-facilitated space can often allow people to express their views, beliefs and opinions and make them feel heard and seen, and importantly equips us to engage with difference, build respect, acceptance, foster peace and find a way ultimately to live and work together. And this is needed more than ever. This is just some of the areas we'll be discussing today with our panel. So to kick off, I'm going to ask our first speaker, Liz Firth, to share with us how safe spaces are developed with young people and schools. Liz is a secondary advisor at the Linking Network, a national charity based in Bradford, which supports schools to support children and young people to explore identity, build connections and strengthen communities so we can all live well together. Liz has a background in creative community-based work to address inequalities and initiatives which use dialogue to build cohesion. I've seen firsthand the fantastic work that Liz does, and I've worked with the Linking Network for a number of years and always been impressed with the charity's evidence-based practice, as well as how they balance this with taking risks and creating space for innovation. So over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Zara. Thank you. So it's great to be here today to talk a little bit about our work with children and young people. So I think we will all remember when we were teenagers ourselves how hard it was to feel like we could be ourselves amongst our peers. We know that rejection from the people around you is one of the things that influences young people's behaviour, and I know that was hard for me growing up when I was at school in the 90s in Bradford, and that was without the challenge of social media, which makes that pressure even more difficult. We work with lots of great schools locally and around the country for whom psychological safety and making sure that children and young people can feel they can be themselves, bring their whole identity to school. They want to see that happen. We want to see that happen too, but it is difficult. We know that children and young people care more about the world more than ever. They want to see things change and they want to be involved in that change. And so that's the point that we pick up when we work with them. So with our work, we always start with identity. We work with the children and young people, encourage them to think about who they are, how they see themselves in the world, and what they want to celebrate about who they are. And it's only at that point where you're feeling okay about who you are that actually you're not going to be threatened by the identity of others. And we also want children and young people to be curious about other people, to be curious about how they see the world, what experiences they've had, the differences that they have. and see those differences as a thing to be curious about, as a way of understanding each other, rather than a difference that can be a dividing thing. So how we work, the last year we reached over 30,000 children and young people across the country in our work. We're a very small team. We are only able to do that because we work through teachers. So here in Bradford and around the country, we have a network. Teachers attend our training, we train them in our programmes, we write the resources to make sure that it's easy for the teachers to access the work, to deliver the programmes in the school. And then when it's happening, I'm going to give you the example of the work that I do with secondary schools. So you can see there on screen, that is a group of young people from a few of our local Bradford secondary schools, and they're in City Hall, and that was I think earlier on this year. And I think that was the second time they've met. So before those children met each other, they did a little bit of work on identity as a school group together, and thinking about exactly what I just mentioned about who they are, about what they want to share with each other. And that gets exchanged through the teachers. So they don't see each other as a group of strangers that I've never met before, but actually start seeing each other as a group of individuals. And we know that this reduces the social anxiety that the young people might feel when they're coming to meet people for the first time. They then have 2 meetings face to face. They'll do lots of fun activities, the kind of things that we could see in the photo there. All activities that are aimed at reducing that awkwardness, the awkwardness that we all feel when we walk into a space for the first time, in a room full of people we haven't met before, and are trying to find that somebody you can talk to, someone you can find a commonality with. So we try and make that as easy as possible. So they do fun activities together, and then when they've done the work together, they return back to their school, they reflect on the process, and then think about how they can share that with their peers. So in terms of psychological safety, it runs through everything we're doing. There is awkwardness, I think, in terms of building psychological safety. It's very difficult to guarantee that you're going to feel comfortable all the time. The work that we do is about making sure that young people get an experience of meeting someone new and having challenging conversations, thinking about topics that can be difficult, thinking about differences that they have, and learning that awkwardness, actually, you get through it. You get to a point where you can feel more comfortable. And then just to finish off, it would be good just to share a particular example of something we do through one of our secondary school programmes. So we've probably all experienced a time where someone has shared something with us. I know I had an experience with a very racist plumber once, which still stays with me because I didn't speak out and I didn't say anything. And I think we've all had those times where someone said something, where we've experienced something and we wish we'd done something more. So we work with our young people to get them to think about what it means to be a bystander in situations that they encounter, and what it might mean to be an upstander. So when they can see themselves in that situation, there's lots of evidence to show that actually just thinking themselves as a person who can act and might act can make a big difference when they encounter those situations. And then as we do through all our work, we get them to practice, because all of these behaviours that we want them to be able to develop as skills are like any skill, they have to practice them. So we give them scenarios, we help them identify what difference those behaviours make, and we get them to practice. So we might give them a scenario of your friend shares a joke that you feel uncomfortable about because it's not a situation that you find funny, you might find it offensive. An older relative might say something that you feel uncomfortable about, and then getting them to find their own language to challenge that, their own way to challenge that. We also work quite a bit on safety, about how to keep themselves safe in those scenarios. We make sure they understand how to report hate crimes they might see. But actually there's a point in adolescence where young people start being affected by the behaviour of their peers more than anyone else around them. So we've recognised that and made sure that we are giving young people the skills to be able to challenge behaviours that they see in their peers, but also be part of creating that change. So that safe spaces are not just safety where it's so safe that actually nobody's being brave, but actually psychologically brave spaces where they can be courageous, where they can find the ways that they feel comfortable to challenge views, to challenge each other, and really to get young people to be thinking critically about the way they're seeing the world and being more open to not being threatened by difference. So it's an ongoing piece of work. The young people are so great when we get them together at giving things a go, at finding ways to to express themselves, to challenge the things they're seeing, and they do get really good at it. And I think as adults in the room, we're often challenged by, oh, actually, where are we looking for the opportunities to find those ways where we can challenge, where we can make sure that we're in line with our own beliefs and the way that we want to see the world. Anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. That was absolutely fantastic. Quite a few things in terms of your presentation that really struck out for me, just really around that changing landscape and complexity, really. And I think what really struck me is that confidence of being who you are, to be able to accept difference and interaction with others, and the level of preparedness that you do actually through the linking network, rather than bringing people together straight away, and obviously exercising that kind of conflict muscle almost, so giving them almost a simulation of what it's like in the real world. So I think that's, and the critical thinking element that you brought in. And I like the way that you've termed psychological to brave spaces. So lots of really food for thought there in terms of that. So thank you so much for sharing your experience. So let me now welcome Kenise to share with us her experiences of bringing together communities across neighbourhoods and cities, and how safe spaces is actually an integral part of programmes she's led on. Unfortunately, Kenise is not with us in the studio, but she is going to join us virtually. So I'm so glad to have you with us, Kenise. Kenise is the Faith and Communities Coordinator for Wellsprings Together, which is a network of Christian charities that are committed to tackling poverty and transforming communities. And Kenise dedicates her work to creating safe spaces and cultures that promote understanding and collaboration. In all the years I've known Kenise, she's someone who doesn't shy away from tough conversations. And some of the stories I've heard Kenise share demonstrates, in my opinion, how impactful and transformational her work has been for the communities she has worked with. So Kenise, over to you. Welcome.
Hi Zara, thanks for asking me to come, and hello everybody. I'm going to split my presentation today in two halves. One is the work with communities and one is the work within a work environment, simply because I do some cultural competency work as well. And I thought if we're talking about work environments and the title is around work environments, I should talk about both. So we have a program that we call Real People Honest Talk, and actually Liz is one of our facilitators, bless her. She's been excellent over the years. And Real People Honest Talk has been it's run across the country. We've had 11 hubs across the country. I cover West Yorkshire, so Leeds, Bradford, Kirklees, and Keighley. They're the areas that I cover. And we take this program into each of the areas. And what we do with that is we bring people together from different faiths and ethnicities into a room. And in a way that's a bit different from Liz is that we prepare the group leads, the project leads, that we're going to have these conversations together, but we bring strangers together over 3 sessions. And we talk about the things that matter to them in their communities, what matters to them in their lives, what matters to them, what's positive about their communities, what's positive about, but also what's challenging. And so the 3 sessions, the first one's about getting to know each other. The second one is going slowly into a deep dive. And the third one is preparing themselves to then, we then take all 4 groups together to do a big conversation where we get the listeners to come in. So like councils, hospitals, NHS, voluntary sector leaders, anyone that we think is a leader will bring together for a big conversation. And we normally have these conversations across 4 areas in Leeds, 4 areas in Bradford, and we just keep them, for each area we will have a big conversation. The positive thing is that there's quite a few of the Real People Honest Talks that we've done, that those relationships have gone from strength to strength to strength to strength, because people have aligned themselves to their differences, but also their challenges that they have in common and the positivity that they have in common. And that's been really, really brilliant. But there's also been a risk attached to this work. And the risk attached to this work has been that I don't know how much policy leaders can do with their budgets. So I don't know how much they want to hear about some of the challenges that might be going on. And if that might be organized crime, that might be cohesion, which one of the areas there was a lot of cohesion issues where people were not coming together and there were challenges there as well. So so there's a risk attached to it, but also if we've got the external environment of the government and I'm going to take the government word back. I'm talking about leaders, where actually for their agenda to have toxic communities is much it is beneficial. So that makes it even harder for those relationships to build. So there has been risk attached to it, but it's been a worthwhile risk because at least those conversations have progressed to a place where people were talking about things that were uncomfortable. People were putting themselves in that into the zone where they might not normally have had those conversations. So there's two sides that come to this work, and it's been a really humbling experience for me and a growth. So like from here to here on the journey of learning for myself while I've been doing the work, and that's helped me to become braver, help them to become braver when they stand in front of all these leaders and say, well, this is what's challenging me, that's what's challenging me, this is what's positive about our communities, how can we work together more? The second area of work that I want to talk about was within the work environment. And there's something about relationships and getting to know the individuals. So through Real People in this Talk, we have a Catalyst Leadership Program for young people, through the work that we've done, I've learned more and more is if you get to know the individual, you get to know what makes them tick, what might be going on in the background without being too trauma-filled and without being too heavy about everything and offloading, without it being to that, but actually getting to know the human that's working with you. You will find more often than not that you have a lot more in common. And as a manager, whether it's a manager staff experience or team experience together, is to create those open environments around a board. So I sit on a board in your work environment. So on the one hand, if you have the micromanaging and you're checking the diaries and you're constantly on them, asking the questions, challenging them, not allowing them to take professional risk within their work, you will get people that will slowly close up and turn away from having that emotionally safe environment. But on the other hand, if you have an open environment, you know the targets are being met, you know that the work is getting done, you leave your staff to come to you or to each other to talk through challenges, you trust them in the professional risks that they might need to be taking in order to make the change that they want to change within organizations, within communities, or wherever they're trying to do the work. You will see that these members of staff will become more confident, more assertive, will probably out, and I don't know how many times that your targets will be smashed, your organization reputation will grow as a result of it, and what you will get is comfortable people that are coming along feeling safe and not having tension headaches, not having stress, not having to go off on stress leave because they're so stressed with how much pressure they're experiencing on this side. And it is a risk. I think, again, it is a risk. It's a risk both ways. If you want to be that micromanaging time, you're going to have people close off from you and you're going to have the sickness. If you have got that open environment, you're probably risking people that might not, when you are trusting them, they might not actually be doing the work that they're saying that they're doing. But way out, see how it's going to work for you and your organization. But relationships, in the end, it's the relationships that matter. It's the relationships that count, and you're with these people for such a big part of your life while you're working with people, especially if you're working full time over a few years. If you don't build those relationships, then what have you got left? I think I'll end it there, Zara.
Thank you so much. A few things, just thoughts triggered while you were talking. I think the main thing that came across for me was around that commonality, and using quite an appreciative inquiry approach. So looking at it from a point of view of being strength-based. So the things that we are good at. I like the truth to power almost. So the importance of having listening events. And I also like the element of actually risk-taking. I think organisations and places that want to deliver psychological safe spaces need to be appreciative that there's always going to be inherently some risk to that. But I think you really articulated quite well the benefits to organisations around that productivity and innovation. But I think importantly, you really touched on a really key point, which is about the process of actually building trust and connection, and actually how important that is for people to be able to live and work together well. So thank you so much, Kenise. We'll come back to you shortly during the Q&A section. Just before I go on to invite our next speaker, just a reminder that you can add your own comments in the chat throughout the event, or add your questions to the questionnaire, which we will come back to later on. So I'm now going to welcome Marianne to share her latest project on safe spaces within the workplace, which can also be seen as good practice on the Diversity Exchange at bradfordforeveryone.co.uk/diversity-exchange for further information. So Marianne is the Strategic Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Lead at In Communities. She's taken a very fresh approach to embedding inclusivity. She's leading with transparency through the design and delivery of their Equality, Diversity, Inclusion strategic plan. And she really works hard to drive inclusivity across the sector. So I can imagine this work is absolutely really challenging. So talk to us about the process you've undertaken in developing safe spaces and why that's really important.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you for inviting me today. This has been great so far. I'm going to talk about one particular initiative that I've been leading on, but I will touch on the end about additional work that we're doing around psychological safety and creating safe spaces. But just to give some context on this particular initiative, it came about because, as you've mentioned, that we do have a strategic equity, diversity and inclusion plan, and I do think it's very important that work around EDI is very strategic and it is driven through that. So it was very important for us to create that sort of safety and speak up culture, because that's how you build inclusivity, when you have that safety and trust for people to be able to speak up. So that was one aspect of it. We know that there is several studies. There's one that I've mentioned there through Race Equality Matters, which shows that 95% of people experience microaggressions in the workplace. But there's additional studies, national studies, that show that there is still real issues around bullying and harassment and other issues going unreported in the workplace as well. So that was another part of it. But we want to make sure that colleagues feel comfortable that colleagues don't feel uncomfortable having certain conversations. So it's how can you direct, because we know that people are going to be talking about certain issues that's happening in the world, certain issues that's happening in our communities. How can we direct those to be in a more safe way? And that's where this initiative around get comfortable with the uncomfortable discussions came from. So just moving forward from that, we just some guidance on how we sort of started to create that. So hopefully this will be some practical tips for our viewers watching. So some of the initial ideation, I think it's really important that you have these conversations, and that it's where you can, if you want to create any initiatives around this, that it is co-created with your colleagues, your key stakeholders. So we knew this particular initiative came out with the last year with the conflict that started between Israel and Gaza. So we knew that on the floors in our areas that there was conversations happening, and it was raised with our EDI network of colleagues across the business that is there something we can do to facilitate some conversations in a safer way, because people weren't feeling comfortable to speak up. So we definitely, as a group, we did some research and best practice around initiatives across different organisations, and one of our colleagues mentioned this sort of initiative that they'd done. From there, we moved on to really sort of understanding what impact we wanted to achieve from it, making sure that it had that sort of strategic guidance. What do we want to achieve? What do we want to see come out of this? And I think it's important that when we're talking about these sort of safe space initiatives, we're really talking about building trust. So it has to have that consistency, and it really has to, if you want to make an impact, there has to be a measure on how we're going to do that, how we're going to effectively build trust, but equally, how are we going to make sure that this isn't just a one-off sort of thing. So just some guidance around facilitation, making sure you're involving key stakeholders around that was really important for us, promoting it across our organisation in a timely fashion. Everyone's very busy. You can't just drop in, events last minute. You need time for people to prepare and make sure they can attend where they can. And making sure that we're really engaging sort of clear safe space rules around this space, and not only safe space rules, but as Liz mentioned, some guidance around brave space rules, which was something that we wanted to facilitate as well. The sessions aren't recorded, they're and now we're running that as a sort of a quarterly initiative, and following that we share insights and actions. So just moving on to how this is planned out with us. We did a successful pilot in November last year, which, as I said, was around a particular issue of the Gaza and Israel conflict, which was causing a lot of people a lot of stress and upset, and there's a lot of media around that, and it's like, how can we facilitate these conversations safely but also encourage critical thinking with some of the media that was around that. The insights and feedback that we got from colleagues was shared obviously anonymously to make sure we've got that safety net there, but with also some guidance on how to support colleagues, so equally that conversation could be facilitated and started across different areas. We then, again, to keep that sort of consistency, we've had a second discussion, which was part of our Race Equality Week campaign, and that was just about let's talk about race. Again, some really good discussions came out of that, and the roundup discussions of those discussions were shared. I think it's really important that you use that as a sort of a base to educate and build awareness. So it was not only feedback from colleagues, but is there other links? Can we sort of, as well as having those discussions, encourage people to go on that self-directed learning journey themselves, which is something we try and do with all our campaigns. So that guidance was just being consistently shared, which is quite important. And we have another discussion that's planned as part of our Pride campaign, where we'll be discussing LGBTQIA plus issues. Again, something which is being very politicised right now, let's be honest. So I think it's important that we're creating that safe space for people to discuss these things and ask questions. That's why it's important that we say, and it's a brave space. Not everyone knows everything, and that's okay. And that's a big part of psychological safety, is allowing that space for people to have personal growth around gaps that they might have. I just wanted to touch on at the end just some other aspects that we're doing around psychological safety. That we have our strategic equity, diversity and inclusion plan. We're moving on to our next one because that was a short-term 1-year plan. Our people strategy, which the EDI plan supports, very much mentions a goal around creating safety for colleagues and environments where people belong. Our inclusive leadership workshops, which I'm leading, that all managers will be going through, which touches on what Kenise was saying around that. It's important that people understand the impact that they can have, that managers can have, that if they role model the right behaviours, that will cascade to other people, and you very much create these safe spaces yourself within your teams, and it's empowering managers to be able to know the impact that they can have. So yeah, just promoting our learning offer and our Speak Out Safely programme. I think it's very important that there's always that anonymous option for people, because as much as you do all this action, some people will still not feel safe. So there has to be that other mechanism as well, which I think is very important. But constantly just giving people the tools to start that self-directed learning journey themselves. Not everyone is on the same journey. Not everyone has the same, the same tools when it comes to having these conversations and facilitating them. So it's what can we do to support people? So, yeah. that's what
Thank you,
we're doing.
Marianne.
Thank
I can
you.
see that you're making a huge amount of transformational change in communities. And I mean, what I really like is around that speak up culture, which Liz spoke to earlier as well, about the bystander and upstander approach, actually, because there are a lot of injustices that we see in the world and discrimination. Actually, it's quite shocking that even in organisations now, we're hearing lots of cases around harassment and bullying and racism, and that, you know, that is still happening in the workplace. Really difficult to combat and change, actually, even though there are very strong commitments from organisations to do something around it. And it's interesting that you've taken the first subject to be around Israel and Gaza, actually. So, you know, we'd like to hear a little bit about that maybe a bit later on. And it's really good to hear how, as an organisation, you're looking at measuring the impact of what you're doing, but also there's a lot of support surrounded around those safe spaces, trying to be more trauma informed, I think, from what you were talking about, and that self-responsibility and accountability. So that I completely agree with that. We shouldn't really wait for things to be facilitated for us. Actually, there's a lot of things we can do individually ourselves if we feel it's an area that we need to learn more about. Lastly, I was just going to say some really good principles, guidance rules that you've already shared with us, and I do like the co-creation element. Actually, that's really, I'm so big on co-design and co-production. It's really important that we work with people and not do to people. So I think that's really important. So thank you, Marianne. That was brilliant, brilliant sharing that. Okay, so finally, a very warm welcome to Hanuk, who's been actually waiting very patiently. Hanuk has a unique role as a Dignity and Respect Support Manager at the University of Bradford and has previously worked in Leeds on restorative practice by ensuring voices of children and care leavers, staff support networks were heard, and this has led to really meaningful change. So Hanuk, tell us what your role entails and how safe spaces are created for students and staff.
Thank you. I don't know if you're seeing my notes at the moment or you're seeing me. So you're seeing me. Can we refer over to the notes? And I'll start off. There we go. It was just leading on from where we started off in terms of defining what a safe space is, as my colleagues have alluded to. And sometimes people feel, well, how can a classroom be safe? You know, what are the aspects in a classroom? It's open, you know, you're revealing yourself. Sometimes you don't want to be there, etc. Teachers picking on you. You know, you might not feel comfortable answering a certain question, etc. We've all been there when, you know, I remember my time. I used to sit in the back of the class when a teacher asked a question and you half-heartedly put your hand up and put your eyes down thinking, you know, if you're putting your hand up, he's not going to pick you up or something. But it's all those notions of coping and surviving. And if you look at the language we talk about, you know, that's not a safe environment where you feel you have to cope or just survive. And so when I've looked at a survey from Holly and Steiner in the early 2000s, and they looked at higher education, particularly social work. There's always been issues in social work, but how they could improve the impact and the learning for social workers before they go out to the big wide world. And they described the classroom as a safe space being somewhere where you feel secure enough to take a risk, as colleagues have already alluded to, honestly express your views, you know, how honest can you actually be in there, and share and explore knowledge, attitudes and behaviours. And these are your own, where you feel comfortable to share that you are worthy of a particular, you know, your individuality, but also your peers as well, who are, you know, from diverse backgrounds, but also your tutor, lecturer, teacher, you know, depending on the climate you're in. They are in there as well, in sometimes a notion of power. And so we have to address all those values, as people have just alluded to previously. And they refer to a classroom space, refers to protection, not only from a physical environment, but also psychological and emotional harm. So just moving on to my next slide, and what is the impact of a safe classroom? So we've talked about, you know, I'll talk about a little bit later on about how we get there. But some of the findings that they found from this survey was to students, basically, this was the feedback. I've got the feedback questionnaire at the end. We can talk about that as well. Others' experience became more personal. I was challenged. Yeah, it was more real world, hands-on. We talk about curriculum. So the curriculum was specific for those. And I'll talk somewhere about Bradford and how we look at redesigning the curriculum, etc. So it is representative. Experiential, so learning by doing, so it's not just taught, etc. It's that feeling that you are actually experiencing things and you're going through the process. And it's about two-way communication, as people have said, when we said about co-facilitation, co-creation. The teacher's learning just as much as you should be in this process. So it's listening and dealing with conflict. And I was introduced as from Leeds, we adopted throughout the council and schools the restorative process, which was in some schools used it as a conflict tool, but we kind of designed it as a relationship conversational tool. So it was the language we were trying to change. So instead of doing 2 or 4 people, we actually worked with people. And that's, again, the notion of co-creation and involvement and participation and engagement. It's getting people to understand what that actually means. And the whole term restorative practice means to restore the balance. So it's an expression of power as well. So it's recognizing what power, and there's different forms of power. There's academic power, monetary power, fiscal power, numerical power. But it's the whole notion of sometimes recognizing that even the power in a name, calling someone a professor or a teacher or a tutor has power. We've just explored whether we should call our postgraduates students, because they're researchers now. So, it was like, we'll give them the due kudos that is, due in there. They're representing the university on placements, etc. So they shouldn't still be students out there, and they should be recognised as postgraduate researchers. So that became a term that we've adopted at the university at the moment. Just moving on to my next slide. So, some of the examples that the university creates psychological safe space. Just a couple of years ago, we introduced in our pharmacy something called team-based learning. It's not a new concept, don't worry, we blind you with science and terminology, TVL. This is an active and collaborative learning process. And some of you from a psychological background may know constructivist theorist approach. And constructivism is a central idea that human learning is constructed, that learners build new knowledge upon the foundation of previous learning. So you're not a blank slate anymore. So a lot of lecturers have to accept the fact that young people have been on this journey. It's an emotional baggage they carry, etc. And this is to create a safe space in the classroom. It's not just intellectually, but also psychologically, emotionally, and physical safe space. And that's what, I'm not going to bore you with all the research and what came out of this, but there was a pleasant change and a move in terms of concentration and the feedback, etc., for young people. And just moving on to the slide, I can show you that one. And one of the things that they looked at was the qualities of a tutor in a safe classroom. And these are what we talked about before, those kind of values that we talk about. And values are very, very important. We have our personal values, but we also have our organisational or institutional values. And sometimes if your values marry up, honesty, truth, justice, morality, etc., if they marry up to what an organisation's values are, that's fundamental to change. But sometimes there's a conflict when sometimes your values are what honesty actually means to you and what an open process means to you. If that's at conflict with your organisational values, that's when tensions or stress can arise. But again, how do we get the tutor to be comfortable with conflict or raising controversial ideas, as people have alluded to before? How to be respectful, supportive, encouraging, demonstrate, caring, and facilitate rather than dictate learning. I'm always alluded to a Dorothy Law poem. She's an educational researcher. One time she said, a teacher can make a hell out of a classroom, or they can make it a heaven just by their words and terminology and the power that they're differentiating in there. So again, there's a lot for a tutor to have responsibility. And just leading on to my next slide. Yeah, so when we talked about definitions, so it's hard to say a safe organisation or a safe classroom. So what we've actually adopted is, my role is dignity and respect support manager. So dignity, as we define it in the university, is focuses on value of an individual and means respecting other people's views, choices, decisions. To treat someone with dignity is to treat them in a way that is respectful of them as valued individuals. So when I talked about the value systems, that's why it's very, very important when we talk about our values. And respect is to be mindful and considerate of the feelings, wishes, needs, opinions, and rights of others. My role is when this doesn't happen, yeah? So it's idealistic, and we know, and it's achievable to make psychological safe spaces within our organisation as well. But sometimes where it doesn't happen, that's why I've been brought in to offer dignity and respect. So I've looked at the term dignity and respect, and sometimes I've done some polling with students as well since my short time here as to do they actually understand the terms and definitions. So in some respects we still call it bullying and harassment because that's the notion they've come out of schooling system or colleging systems where it is an anti-bullying policy. And our dignity and respect, what we want to make it is also open it up for anonymous reporting, because what we're finding is we want to address some of the barriers to this, and we can go on and talk about this in some of the conversations we may have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Hannah. That was just a brilliant presentation. I mean, lots of really good thoughts kind of triggered from your presentation there. So really just thinking about that two-way process. That's really important, isn't it? The facilitator isn't the expert, should we say. It's about having that mutual respect. I really like the fact that you used a restorative practice and processes in what you were talking about, and also about challenging power and balance. That's really incredibly important in terms of language that you mentioned, and actually not discounting people's previous experiences when they come into that space. So really just being mindful of people's lived experiences. And a lot about things like potentially linking back to things like who we are in terms of values. So wonderful presentation, lots of thoughts there, and I'm sure for the other panelists as well. So while we wait for questions from our viewers, I've got a couple that I will kick off with. Just as a reminder for our viewers at the moment, if you would like to ask any questions, please don't forget that you have an opportunity to put that into the Q&A section, and I'll make sure that I'll pick those up. Just to give you a little bit of a starter, I guess, just to get the conversation going between us. I wanted to ask, I suppose, in terms of what you've all really described, is the sense of bringing people together to have the conversation, but how do you get people involved that might not be the usual suspects? So people who probably would be very uncomfortable with this to start with, and actually they don't want to be in the room. How do you get those people involved in the conversation? What's your experiences? Have they been around that? Does anybody wants to kick off?
I'll start with one thing just around the, not the get comfortable, it is partly to do with that, but through our inclusive leadership, that's for all managers. So I think you have to really sort of be clear that this is something that's important, that we need to be having the right conversations. We need to be empowering people to, be able to be themselves and to speak up. So I guess that's one way, but that was equally a good way for me to get people to get involved with our new initiative when we started it, because it was asking people to join as part of, you're on this journey to be a more inclusive leader. Now this is the time for you to sort of show that that's something that you're going to do. Come and join our discussion, or encourage your team to join as part of you encouraging your team to be more inclusive. So I guess that's one example. But I think apart from that, I think it's just about making sure that your comms are very clear on that guidance of that the space will be really safe, and that this isn't just a one-off. I think sometimes people switch off when they think it's just tokenistic or for the sake of it.
Thanks, Marianne. And actually there's something about building that evidence base, isn't there? So just really presenting actually why it's really important to have these conversations. And do you feel that there's still, I mean, it's a great approach because obviously it's not just about being an inclusive leader, it's about being an inclusive organisation and having an inclusive culture, and that obviously it's about how we all interact in that sort of space. So how do you come across, and how do you approach resistance? And that's a question for all of you really. So if anybody wants to come in with that.
Just to finish off your last question, I think sometimes I have a joke. I get my colleagues Quality Street, and I sit there with a little sticker, and I cut out an E, and I stick it so quality becomes equality. So my colleagues in the equality department, that's what you're getting for Christmas. And so it's just that, but it's hard. How do we put the E back into equality, you know, to make it equality? And I think sometimes we're pressured with the luxury of time. We talk about quality time and giving quality time to our young people, but sometimes we're not given quality time or time as staff members to develop ourselves also because of our caseloads, you know, backlogs, meetings, that and the other. So to give that precious commodity of establishing a relationship, I think managers need to realise it takes time. And sometimes it's like, how long's a piece of string? So that's what we looked at Leeds before, particularly for our social workers when they worked with young people, was we called it the relationship approach, because it is establishing that trust, what we've talked to, as colleagues alluded to before. And to offer that trust took that time, but that was marred with all the caseload time that they had to have as well. So in a restorative approach, we have a restorative language, where they were given skills. It sounds silly, but it was those training elements in the sense of how to ask appropriate questions. And then quiet, give them time to reflect and think. And that's, again, the notion that I think people forget how much of value is time. You know, if you've done psychology or counselling training before, they'll know they'll ask you a question, and silence is hard. And we always like to fill that silence. And they always say, stay quiet. Wait for the response, even if it takes a minute, it can seem like an hour sometimes, but wait for that response. And particularly with young people, to give them that comfortable space and that trust and that building in that relationship, they need that time to suss you out a little bit and establish that trust. So for me, again, it's time, but I appreciate working times and 37 hours working week. You have to fill it, you know.
Actually, you made a very good valid point there about, you know, inclusive leadership is about reflection, isn't it? You have to reflect on yourself and others, especially when you're leading organisations and teams as well. And actually, how you are is going to be reflective of how your organisation and culture is. So there's something about not just being reflective, but it's the depth of reflection. And there is a terminology for that, but it kind of escapes me. But there's something about taking that time off and really just thinking things through, and then being able to develop some actions on the back of that really kind of demonstrates not just in terms of what we're saying, but actually that we're actually changing and doing something different as well. Just to bring Kenise or Liz into the space as well, I'm conscious.
I was just going to say something that I think is often important. We can focus on getting people in the space, and I think in the work I've done, relationships is usually key to that. So even if you don't hold the relationship yourself, but you want someone to be in the room who has a relationship of trust with that person that could bring them in. In our work with schools, we don't determine how a school identifies which group should be involved. But what's interesting is the longer we work with a school, we find that they become more confident in who they bring into the space, and they will often start inviting the students that previously they might have overlooked, but actually that they think will get the most out of being involved, which is lovely to see. I think we also put quite a bit of a focus on what happens when you first come into that room. So we talked a bit about the preparation, but actually whose space does it feel like? Does it feel like everyone has an equal status in that space? How are the chairs set out? We really try to think about how is this going to feel for the most socially anxious person who is going to walk into that space, and are they going to feel comfortable? A lot of it's about refreshments. You know, you can't overlook the difference that a nice biscuit can make, but we try and make sure that when, for example, our young people walk into a room, nobody is sat down. So we have activities that are already in place so that everyone is stood up. People are moving around, trying to discourage people from standing in a big group. Just thinking about what makes the space intimidating, making sure people have heard each other's names, they hear them being pronounced repeatedly so that you feel able to use each other's names because you can pronounce them properly. That's really important. So name badges, lots of ways of getting people to feel comfortable. So not doing your favourite icebreaker because you love it because you've got a funny story, but actually other people absolutely hate it. So a lot of thought into those little things that might not be the thing that you want to get out of it, but actually without those in place, you're not going to achieve your aims.
And it's about creating the environment, isn't it? About what you want, how you set out things for people to feel comfortable and really fully participate within that space. I think we've got Kenise online. Let's just see if Kenise has got any particular thoughts on the questions.
I was just thinking everyone's covered quite a lot, but maybe I'll give one example of a young woman that we were working with in one of the areas for Real People Honest Talk. And she wanted to come in and speak, but was very, very hesitant, was scared of the risk of her coming to speak, was scared of her physical safety outside of the circle or outside of the real people on his talk sessions. And how we did that was we worked with the community centre manager, so where we were going to be holding the sessions. And it was the support, the practical and emotional support she got from the team in the centre that brought her in and then enabled her to speak, because she also wasn't confident to speak in a group. But because there was that emotional safety for her with the facilitator, with the environment, with the community centre support, she was able to then raise the things that she was experiencing. And then she was also kept safe afterwards. So it wasn't just the beginning, before she came in the room, during the room, and then afterwards as well, she was taken care of. So there was a bit of that hand-holding when it came to this young person, but it was really important, because we wouldn't have got a full idea about what the challenges were within that area that we were working in if that space hadn't been created for her.
Thank you, Kenise. Yeah, lots of really useful sort of tips there, if you like, just from that one story, and you can see perhaps that would have made her experience a lot better as well, and hopefully participate further. So I suppose there's a little bit of a question for me really around who sets the agenda then, because some of you have talked about sort of that co-production or co-creation and co-design of elements, and how important it is, you know, that preparedness level that you're doing with groups individually, perhaps with people individually, before you're bringing them into the space. So I wanted to just say, you know, how do people set the agenda? Who sets the agenda? How do people feel that they own what's happening within that space? So just a little bit of reflection on your experiences there. Liz, I'm going to come to you first, I think. Yeah.
I think I need a plan. I need, for my own psychological safety, to have a plan. But I think it is really important to feel that if the energy in the room is around something different, that you're going to feel confident enough to be able to move with that and to abandon your plan if actually what needs to be named in the room is something quite different. And to trust, it's back to that thing you mentioned earlier about you as the facilitator of the space don't have to have the expertise. The expertise is in the room. Your job is a different job. Your job is to make sure that you can take people on a journey, but that you can end it well as well. So it's making sure that you had enough experience of that and have enough confidence to know that actually if there's something else going on in the room, that you feel able to run with that, but also to check in that it's not just a few voices who are very confident, very dominant. That is really tricky. And so it's making sure that there's consensus, that people have a space. So I believe that, you know, a lot of the spaces that we have will always start and end with a circle, but it's also, and as Kenise has mentioned, that is not where everybody feels safe. And so lots of work in smaller groups is really important as well, allowing people to be able to, and we do this even, you know, there can be a tendency in school groups to go sit with someone that you haven't met before. Well, actually going and sitting with someone you haven't met before might make you feel absolutely terrified, but going and speaking to someone you haven't met before with your friend with you, that might be the bit. So yeah, I think it's important to make sure that you can be flexible to whatever is going on in the room, but that you're making sure that there is an equality of the voices in that. And I think there's also something really important about being able to name things as well. So there can be examples of where something isn't being said and you know that something isn't being said, but you can absolutely feel that there is something in that room that needs bringing up, that people's behaviour can tell you something quite different than what they're articulating. And sometimes it is really important to be able to pause and to be able to say, I feel that you are fed up, that there's something you want to say, like, and being flexible about whether you're breaking into small groups, whether you're having some one-on-one conversations, but feeling confident in yourself that you can sometimes feel what's going on in a space even without that being articulated.
There's a real, I think when you talk about skills, there's a real element of just sensing what's happening, isn't it? And I was just going to say, wow, there's a lot of risk taking in that approach, isn't there? Because you're relinquishing actually that power and control. And yeah, it just requires, I suppose what you just said as well, just validation of what people are feeling in the room and naming the elephant in that space as well. Kenise, let me come back to you because I know you've had lots of experiences in sort of spaces within this. Love to hear your thoughts.
From my experience of the work that we've done, we don't set the agenda. We will talk through facilitators about what we expect, because We can't tell communities what's happening to them. It's their experiences that are going to shape the direction that we're going to go in. It's not ours, because we're not living there. We're not experiencing with it. And I suppose what was really, really eye-opening for me was that with the 3 areas that we covered, Leeds, Bradford and Kirklees, every single area had a different theme. So it was cohesion and misogyny and that type of experience in Kirklees. It was racism and hostile environment in Leeds. It was organised crime and other things that were happening within Bradford. So each area has a different physical, geographical area, had a very different feel. So it was their experiences that mattered. It wasn't for us to go in and say to them, this is our agenda, this is what we want. It was us to say, we're giving you a voice, we want to give you a platform, and it's up to you how you use this opportunity for yourselves, if you want to take the opportunity or if you see it as an opportunity. And then the second thing as well, when I'm doing the other work, again in a work context, is we have a job description. So you have a job description and you have to do your job. But within that job, what is it that what sort of, not within that job description, where do you come into it, the individual, to make that role yours? And where are the boundaries around it? So there's something, and so that you're safe to be yourself within that job description, even though the job description is quite generic, it's legal, it's how you are supposed to work. But within that, where's the individual that can make that job into who they are and who they become within the role? So there's 2 aspects there that I wanted to.
Just really, useful experience that you're sharing as well through that. And interesting what you talked about, the job description and people really owning what that job entails actually, and bringing their selves. Because I think it's those kind of soft skills that we talk about. Maybe soft skills is probably the wrong word, but yeah, thank you so much for that. Marianne, Hanik, are there any thoughts from you too?
Yeah, I think the get comfortable with the uncomfortable discussions that we have is a little bit different, as in, I guess they step more into that sort of brave space of it. We want people to ask those challenging questions or feel comfortable to ask those. There is obviously some preparation that goes into that. I think it's always good to give some context around the subject. We're taking that action to have themed discussions on certain subjects that we think are important, that we know are important to our colleagues. So I think starting off with that, but just some general sort of questions that I think would be good, but very much as what Liz was saying, using this, understanding the sort of response of people in that space to sort of guide it moving forwards. Ours are online discussions at the moment because we feel that people would feel a bit more comfortable online with it not being recorded, with it not being face to face. But I would like to see that move to potentially being in person down the line. So I guess it's it's about making sure you're giving it that sort of framework of why we're here. Here's some education that you might not have known, or here's some context on the subject. Let's just open up that discussion and see where it goes. We're still really experimenting with it, only being on to our third discussion. But
actually, Mary, I've got a specific question for you as well.
Yeah.
So I'm very intrigued that you started your conversation around Israel and Gaza. Because obviously we hear a lot around racism and discrimination, bullying, and there could be natural topics that come up, because obviously we've all done sort of listening exercises across the workplace to say what are the kind of key issues, misogyny, gender inequality, those sorts of things do come up. I suppose I'm interested in is, why Israel and Gaza, and what was the reaction from the organisation to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, it was very much supported, but this is where that co-creation sort of element comes into it. So it started off with a discussion with our EDI network of, we know we're feeling it, we had a discussion around the concept of empathic distress as part of one of our meetings, and you know, I was given sharing tools and resources that I think would be helpful for them to then cascade to their teams, and it was, what more can we do? Because we knew that those, again, it's that you know that people are going to be having conversations. We know that, especially in the area that we are working within, you know, in Bradford, it's a very diverse area. There's lots of different communities, but regardless of that, this is a, you know, humanitarian issue that was for the first time being broadcast online on your TVs all the time. So it was that sort of thing of how can we support people, and it just came from wanting to support people, and for people to know that they can ask questions, they can, and encourage that sort of critical thinking of, you know, not only there is support out there and given some resources there, but equally take a step back. I think that concept around empathic distress was a big part of it as well, of, you know, take a step back. If you don't feel that you can cope with things that you're seeing on the news all the time, take a little step back, but equally take some time to educate yourself on different viewpoints. So yeah, I know it's an interesting one and potentially a controversial one to start with, but this is where being guided by your colleagues on what their voice is saying, I think, is very important. And I very much, you know, I'm pleased that our executive team and our senior leader team were behind us starting this discussion, but equally moving on to tackle other issues, talking about race, talking about LGBT, and it will turn into other topics that, you know, potentially people have difficulty speaking about. But that's the whole thing about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. You've got to, you know, talk about these things for you to be comfortable addressing them in the workplace and speaking up and not being a bystander.
Actually, we talk quite a lot, don't we, about bringing your whole self to work, don't we? And we're not just like professional people that come to work and then we have a personal life. A lot of that things around personal life kind of spills into our professional life, doesn't it? So it's very, I mean, I commend you, first of all. It is the elephant in the room sometimes in organisations. You know, we try to take a very neutral approach to that. So I really, you know, I commend the fact that you addressed it and that you created that space for conversation and that you really heard what your staff was saying. I think Kenise wants to come into this as well. So Kenise, over to you.
Yeah, so can I come in on it? Obviously, my work is interfaith, so this has been a big part of since October the 7th happened, it's been a big part of my life. But on the conversation of should we be having these conversations within the work environment, actually, when you've got such a big international humanitarian crisis happening, how is it not going to come into the workplace? How is it not going to go into the schools? And I think what was concerning for me throughout all this time when we were doing the work, and was specifically with schools and within the education, but also within the employment sector, was this perception that if young people or if some of the adults had opinions and use certain type of language, like, for example, and I'll say it as it is, if they did use the language of genocide, ethnic cleansing, or anything else, then the referral for prevent would be coming in. And I think that the risk there, what happened with schools, was you're closing down a conversation when we should be opening up the conversation so people can feel safe and upset. And instead of using the words radicalization and extremism, was the conversation had with young people. And actually what the term that should have been used at the time was, these children have never seen anything like this before in their entire life, and neither have the adults that are going into workplace seen the type of images that were uncensored coming out of the Middle East. The language that should have been used was vicarious trauma, that they were experiencing that trauma and then going to work and school the next day, feeling it, wanting to cry. How could it not go into the workplace? How could it not? Because you're a human being. You're not going to separate the two like a robot and going to work the next day and pretend all of that's not happening. So I think there's been a lot, from my perspective, is, again, let's go back down to the human, about what's happening to the people to the people within this country. Internationally, yeah, there's not what's happening to people internationally, but what we're seeing here, and then what's coming into our workplaces as a result of it, and our schools as a result of it. And then how are we using the authoritarian route of prevent and radicalization and that type of language, or are we saying these people are upset, they've never seen, it's extraordinary what's happening, the scenes are not like what we've ever seen before in our existence, and how are we then dealing with that as a compassionate, empathic organization?
Thank you, Kenise. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, some of the images that were coming out on social media were really shocking. And actually, if you studied a little bit on neuroscience, you realise sometimes when we see images, even when we're watching films, actually our brain doesn't actually know the difference of what's happening and what isn't happening, because we feel those exact emotions. I know lots of people that that reached out to me who explained how traumatic that they were feeling about some of the images that they were seeing all the time. And so just going back to Hanik and Liz, I suppose how does that play out in sort of the student life and young people?
Yeah, we specifically at the university set up support mechanisms. So we already have a counselling service and an employee assistance programme, but specifically around this issue, we knew individuals, as just alluded to by colleagues, who were coming with this lived trauma, revisiting, etc. They needed a safe space. And it couldn't be done in a safe classroom, so we individualised this, where we did put it on Canva, our internal reporting system, etc., promoted it through Students' Union to say there is a safe place where you can address some of these issues. And we knew some of our international students obviously had family members back there, so their concerns was adamant, and through our data system we could target those individuals and specifically send out support for them as well. So it's an individual thing, but also, like you said, a collective thing to... Sometimes it's back to that language thing to when we talk about challenging conversations. Just the mere use of the term challenging, it's going to be challenging because that's what it says on the tin. It's a challenging conversation. Can't they just be conversations? And as long as we make it into a safe environment, I've got some tips on how we can arrange that, ground rules, expectations, challenge the comment, not the person, don't personalise it, listen to an opinion, all those sorts of things beforehand, have a signed agreement, etc. So there are ways. And just to finish off, I know I hog a lot once I start talking, I don't finish, is one of the notions or knee-jerk reactions in anything different is fear. Yeah, and I use fear as an acronym, FEAR. Fear everything and run away from it, bury your head in the sand. Or, let's flip it, face everything and rejoice, because it's solution focused. You can move on, but there's a way we can face it. So let's address that fear. And I think a lot of this is tantamount onto the media, looking at people's perceptions and fears. There's terrorists amongst us, etc., this, that, and the other. And we know the media panders to all this. So we're in the media environment here, so we have a media studies skills here that allows you to look at unconscious bias within adverts and the trauma existence. What's the real message that's being sent out? It was all right in the 70s, programs like that was overtly, racist, sexist, homophobic, but now you're thinking it's still there, but it's quite subtle. Is it just me looking at this and my paranoia and anxiety? But there are mechanisms and tools which we can educate people to say, you're not wrong there, mate. There's something there. Thank you.
Thanks, Hanik. And Liz, I'm going to let you say the final word before we go into, I think we've got some audience questions now, so I'll let you say the final word on this.
Yeah, we did respond back in October when events first started and as the situations developed, and it was really about encouraging schools to not have a knee-jerk reaction and not to automatically shut things down. I think there were lots of schools who were worried about, well, we've got to hold the line around behaviour, around the use of flags, around things that they normally wouldn't have allowed students to do, and actually to try and start from a point of actually, if you've got students who are concerned about this situation that is happening, then you've got young people and children that care, and that was a point of strength rather than seeing it as a weakness and as something to be concerned about. And then to think about actually how do they respond when they are feeling the impact as a school community of any situation, whether that is a situation locally, internally, globally. You know, we had the awful incident in the school in Wales yesterday, and you kind of hope that schools are prepared for how they would act. And so it's around making sure that their staff feel supported, that actually staff didn't have to suddenly have expertise in the particular, you know, the history of the Middle East, but that actually we're able to respond to young people in those situations, and are particularly really thinking about what's been mentioned quite a few times already about a trauma-informed response, so that children and young people were actually seeing a situation unfold unlike anything they'd seen before, and were having it there on their phones. So it was really about thinking about what is the well-being of those young people, but actually as a school, and I think it's something that is still concerning now. If you chose to be silent because you felt that this was something that was happening externally to school and wasn't a school's response, how did that impact on the young people who felt really, really connected and affected by that situation? And how would they be feeling now over 6 months on? And if they come back in September and as a school community, if it still hasn't been named, still hasn't been acknowledged, how do those students feel that actually back to this idea of they can bring their whole selves to school? So yeah, it is a concern. It's so encouraging to see institutions like the university, like in communities, really being able to name these situations and being able to respond to it directly. And yeah, just hoping that that is something that schools feel able to do even when it's really, really difficult situations like this.
And actually I've seen quite a lot of really useful resources that have come out from the Linking Network and the kind of support that you give teachers. I think that's, you know, really like on point. It's reactive to what's going on, you're responsive, so just amazing. And I think there's an opportunity there for people to really learn from that. You know, I've certainly shared it with lots of other organisations as well as a starting point for organisations particularly. So I'm going to go to a question that we've got from my audience. And we might have further ones that come up. But an audience member is asking, is the concept of safe spaces sometimes misunderstood or abused to shut down challenge or to not hear, especially some things that people don't want to hear or like to hear? So any particular thoughts on that?
I think this question is coming from that potentially that there is a misunderstanding on those things, that you can't say you know you can't say this now, you can't say that. And again, it's the part of this weaponization of a lot of things that we see in the media when it comes to using inclusive language and things like that. That I think that might be potentially what they're thinking about there. But I think this is where that importance of thinking about safe spaces and brave spaces is quite important. You know, like I said, brave space is about allowing those spaces for people to ask challenging questions or have different views, you know, even if that isn't comfortable. So, you know, I think that's something that's important to happen. You know, we've seen there's some really good initiatives that are across the world and in other areas where you bring people with different opposing views together and you find that middle ground, and that's how we move forward with a lot of things. So yeah, potentially it is misunderstood if you feel like, but then that comes to how these spaces are communicated. You know, if it is about talking about these issues and, you know, these uncomfortable spaces, that should be clear. And, you know, safe spaces should still be that environment where you feel security to ask things that you don't know about. A slogan that I always use with a lot of the comms that I put out is curiosity without judgment is always encouraged, and it's always about the intention of that person when it comes to whatever subject you're talking about. So,
thanks, Maz. Tarek, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, it's going back to a restorative approach, because a restorative approach actually teaches you, or the aspiration is to be fully challenged or high challenge balanced against high support. So as managers, that's what we want for individuals to, you know, have that change within an organisations. It has to be challenging as well, but it has to be supported. I was just going back to about the conversations and how they can be stifled sometimes. I'm from an organisation which respects freedom of speech when it comes to external speakers. Education is about emancipating your brain, that sort of thing, critical consciousness, etc. Make you think and see things from a different perspective. But sometimes we have to balance that. We have an events team here which includes lots of legal aspects, which is who's the speaker, when they come in, what's their pedigree, what other university have they been to, what has been the feedback, and sometimes you think, I'm not doing this checklist, I can't guarantee what the conversation's going to be rife, but here's my risk assessment to say, in case this happens, and sometimes it's 3 or 4 pages long, and I can understand where that question was asked, because is that an attempt to stifle that down? And I feel, well, no, if I can answer what your anxiousness or anxiety may be, and I can address it through my risk assessment, fair enough. Shouldn't that be validated enough for me to allow this particular speaker? And again, how do we create psychological space once the checklist's been done? Is it a fear factor again? So.
Yeah, really good point, Anik. And I'm just coming back to Liz, actually, because I know you mentioned in your presentation and some earlier conversations about just sort of equalising sort of the space and making sure people don't dominate. Do you want to just elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, I think we similar to what Anik mentioned, we have kind of a working together agreement how we expect people to behave in the space. So some of that, at least you can explore that in the beginning. And so it is that challenge of, if you're someone like me who enjoys talking, has a thought, wants to share it, then asking for those people to take responsibility to perhaps think about, actually, does everyone in the room need to hear this now? Because you need to be sharing the space. And then if you're someone who's quieter, find it harder to share your views, then actually part of that space working for you has got to be that you take responsibility for your voice being heard, no matter how hard that is. And then if you've set that up at the beginning, that agreement, then you can refer back to it if you need to. You can remind people that actually there needs to be some more sharing of the space. And just breaking it down, not relying on one conversation. So there's lots of different facilitation techniques you can use, but having people to, perhaps you need to slow it down, perhaps you need people to have smaller group conversations before bringing it back into a circle. So there's lots of things you can do at the point if that's happening where you are having a few people dominating. But yeah, not being afraid to name that and to shift it around.
Brilliant. So I think we've got a couple of more questions coming through as well. So this particular one, I think I'm going to ask Anik to maybe kick us off with, but how do you manage the need for academic freedom with cancel culture when increasingly some see any kind of difference of opinion as an issue?
I think it's kind of what answered the previous question. It's the balance. What do you err on, caution and fear because of the reputation of this particular individual that might be coming to your organisations, balanced with academic freedom, but also balanced with a duty of care to other students within your organisation as well, incitement to harassment or bullying. You have to balance it from a legal concept as well. So I think, I'm glad I'm not making that judgment, but I am sometimes a recipient of trying to prove my case. So it's, echelons higher up from me who make that valid decisions for us. And it's hard to act in that response without validation because it's always open to appeal as well. And that's what sometimes I do, is the high challenge, and to say, well, hang on, I don't really understand your fear factor here. If I address it like this, will you still permit this? And if there's no answer, there's no answer.
Thank you, Anik. Okay, let's move to the next question. How do you approach open conversations where there are conflicting sides that could also involve multiple intersectional characteristics? So I don't know, Marianne, do you want to kick off with that one?
Really good question. And I guess this is, again, comes back to that intention of what the space is about. I think it's about understanding that, everyone has different opinions, and this is where that whole thing of that sort of brave space and making sure that that's shared, that we all have different perspectives. And intersectionality is something, we all have intersectional characteristics, we all have different experiences, and I think there is a lot of sort of, when it comes to that concept of like protected characteristics, everyone has in one way a protected characteristic. So it's about leveling the playing field a little bit there on that sort of understanding of there will be a common ground that we can all share. Dealing with that sort of conflict has to be done in a sort of professional, I think this is where it's important to lean into organisational sort of values and behaviours as well. You know, as much as we're creating this space to support people and to allow that space for personal growth, because we have a commitment to EDI, there is still values and behaviours that we expect all our colleagues to sort of make sure that we're respectful of. But yeah, it's we're adults, and I'd like to think that in some of these spaces that there is that ability to be adults around some of those conflicting good discussions and understand that doesn't make someone a bad person just because they've got a different view. So
thank you for that. And I think that's at the reality, isn't it? We are all different.
yeah.
And it's about how we engage and interact with difference and have that respect and acceptance within that place.
And I suppose just to add as well, it's what the goal is, that actually is it to try and have everybody in one perspective. You know, people do have it's like it says, it's complex. They've got multiple characteristics. We are we are all complex individuals. Actually, is it about seeking to understand each other, understanding each other's positions, but not to try and get uniform agreement, and that might not be.
Or convince somebody.
That actually you understand each other better, and maybe you don't get along, maybe you still disagree, but you've got a better understanding of that moving forward.
Is that the whole thing of you don't ever want to have like sort of echo chambers. We don't want everyone to always agree and just go along with what everyone says. We want, it's good to have diverse perspectives and diverse opinions. That's how you make better decisions, and that's how you grow as a person as well. So,
Kenise, would you like to come into this one? And then we'll have one more question just to end, because we're nearly coming to the end of the session, and that's flown by.
Can you ask me the question again? Because I have had some thoughts on from what Liz and Marianne have been saying. Can you ask me the question?
Yeah, so the question is, how do you approach open conversations where there are conflicting sides that could also involve multiple intersectional characteristics?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about it, and I think there are complexities, and the world that we live in right now we're in one of our most complex times. And I think it boils down to relationships, it boils down to trust, it boils down to leadership. And if you've got all those type of scaffolding in place, we can have a respectful conversation that we don't agree on, that we're not going to agree on. It's really important that we do intersectionality, the acceptance of every individual for who they are is the key to progress, but only if we do it in a respectful way and not dismiss people's experiences, maybe their barriers, their cultural norms, their neurodiversity. If we don't accept these things ourselves, then you are going to have tension. It is going to be difficult, but it's how we build those relationships of trust with each other.
Thanks, Kenise. Okay, so just on that last kind of note, I'm just thinking about the difference it makes and the impact it has. So just thinking about all your experiences about bringing people together in the space, what, is there opportunity, obviously, some of that peace building and solutions that people can collaboratively come together on? So are there any examples, I suppose, just thinking about that sort of theme for today around the UNIfy Festival, about what a difference we make? Is there anything that really comes to mind just around that?
What unsuccessful kind of peace building, or what?
A solution that you might have come up with just by bringing people together. Yeah, so the impact of what those conversations, I suppose, can bring, and perhaps it can be transformational for the individual. Maybe not necessarily it's about moving towards a particular goal, but there might be a personal transformation. It could be a community transformation, a workplace transformation. So any examples like that would be quite good to share.
Just from my previous one, I'm from Leeds Youth Service previously. We did voice, influence and change, and lots of intergenerational work. So I could think of loads of examples on my estate where there used to be mistrust. We used to have I don't know if it's a politically correct term still, but the old people's home and our youth centre in the same vicinity. And I'd always be talking to their manager about complaints of our young people, antisocial behaviour, daubing, graffiti, etc. So we just got together and said, let's do something together. And so it was one of those it was a risk. We took the risk, did our risk assessments, etc. And it worked off really good. It was a music project. So it was looking at 60s rock and roll, 50s music, etc. in the old people's home, and hip hop. And they worked together with a music production company, and we made a song. And it was like, whoa, not We Are the World and stuff, but it was tantamount to that, to understanding diversity and stuff. Ever so much that some of our young people volunteered just to go in and talk to other people, do poetry sessions and stuff. That's the kind of example where, it's a success, but there are other ones as well, but that's the clearest one from my mind, from my background, that's, was achievable.
That's really heartwarming, actually. It's quite a really nice example, isn't it? Liz, do you have any?
Oh, we had, it's a few years ago now, but there were two girls from different schools just up the road here in Bradford, and these two schools are quite close, but quite different cohorts of young people attending them, and they did some work together, and one of the young girls did this scream, and the teachers who were present were quite alarmed, thinking something awful had happened, and she went, "Oh miss, I've found the Grange version of me," and Grange was the other school, and so she'd found this girl who looked totally different to her, quite a different experience of growing up in Bradford, and they found that they shared the love of the same music, and that was just, probably didn't see each other again after that, but it was just that confidence that actually there are people that she will find in her life that might not appearances, have not a lot in common with, but actually does have things to share. So yeah.
Oh, what a great reminder. And really heartwarming again, just to hear that. So before we close, I want you to provide basically all of you an opportunity just for a final word. What is the one thing you'd want viewers to take away from this session? So I'm going to kick off with Kenise, if that's all right. Kenise.
I did think about that question because you prepared us, didn't you? I think for me is empathy, compassion, understanding of the intersection of people that work with you. It's so important that we are, it sounds really trivial to say or small to say kind, but actually until we have that understanding of each other and giving each other space to be human. Sometimes I say, I don't think we're given that opportunity to be human and make mistakes. So that's my last word. Give people the opportunity to make mistakes and work with people with empathy.
Thank you, Kenise. Liz.
I think this idea of being brave, so whether it's being brave to take risks, being brave enough to be able to change your own mind from things you hear, things you experience, and also we've not talked about it as much, but about being vulnerable, that actually if something impacts you, then it's okay to say that it's impacted you. It's okay to have feelings and to be affected by things, and to keep practicing that you may well get it wrong, but that these skills, we just need to keep trying at it and we will get better.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, a really good reminder. Maz?
Yeah, I think mine would be speak to your colleagues, speak to your customers, do your research, go out, speak to community members. That's where you'll find the initiatives, the schemes, however you want to describe it, that'll really make the most impact, and really think about those the components of trust. So that whole thing of it needing to be consistent, transparent, and have those components of compassion and care. So
thank you, Maz. And Hanik, final word.
Yeah, it'll be more than one word, sorry. It was just that final question you asked me. It's got my brain thinking back to that time again. And I just want to end with a musical note. If you want to make a world a better place, take a look at yourself and make that change. So look in the mirror, reflect, and make that change.
I like that, Hannah. That's a really good word to end on. So we're now to the end of our session. Just a massive thank you to our panel members, and especially all of our viewers for joining us and actually staying with us. There's a short poll in the chat to give us feedback about the event, so please remember to complete it before you leave. And if you'd like to watch or participate in more sessions like this or get involved in the work of equalities across Bradford District and Craven, please sign up to the Diversity Exchange at bradfordforeveryone.co.uk/diversity-exchange. Thank you and goodbye.